Who is the only enemy Dexter Morgan could never win? He was not a murderer or an intellectual author. It was not someone who could track, catch, or eliminate. This enemy was not out of him. He was born inside. From the moment his world was soaked with blood, he became rooted, whispering in his mind, shaping all his dark decisions. Dexter called him the Dark Passenger, a force he could never silence, regardless of how much he tried. But what is the Dark Passenger, and why was it impossible to escape? Stay with us, because the answer will change how you see it forever. Dexter's greatest enemy did not come from abroad. It was born the moment his mother was brutally murdered in front of him. Imagine this, a little boy, frozen in fear, sitting in a pool of his mother's blood. That moment was not only traumatic but created something inside him, something dark. As Dexter grew, that darkness also grew. It became the voice that we now know as the Dark Passenger. But here is the turn. This was not just a wound from his past. It was something deeper, something that felt alive. Strangely, it gave it a purpose, but the events that followed made this darkness even stronger. Harry Morgan, Dexter's adoptive father, saw early signals: killing animals, a cold lack of emotion. Most parents would resort to therapy, and Harry did. He sought guidance from Dr. Evelyn Vogel, an expert in understanding psychopaths. Together, they designed the Harry Code, a strict set of rules to help Dexter channel their violent impulses by attacking those who deserve it. Harry's goal was simple: protect Dexter from society and society from Dexter. But here is the trap. The code was not just control, it was permission. By giving Dexter a frame, Harry and Vogel did not eliminate darkness. They structured him. The passenger was not silenced. A focus was given, a purpose. Harry thought he was saving Dexter, but he was teaching the Dark Passenger how to take charge. When giving Dexter rules, Harry did not suppress the darkness. He gave him a system. The Dark Passenger was no longer just a chaotic force. He became methodical, deliberate, and powerful. And when Dexter carried out his first murder under the code, Harry realized too late that his plan had not saved his son. He had perfected the monster inside him. Even Harry couldn't live with what he had created. Seeing Dexter calmly, almost effortlessly taking another human life shattered me. Harry had always believed that he had control, that the code could channel Dexter's darkness. But at that time, he saw the truth. The passenger was not something that you could guide or drive. It was bigger than the code, bigger than him. 3 days later, consumed by guilt and despair, Harry ended his life. His death became the first life that the Dark Passenger claimed indirectly. But the Dark Passenger was not over. He had only begun. Dexter tries to live a normal life, a job, a family, a sense of purpose. He did everything that society tells us leads to happiness. Outside, it was the husband, the father, and the perfect co-worker. But it didn't matter how hard he tried, the passenger was always there, pulling him back to the shadows. It was not just a whispering voice in his ear. It was a force, both a part of him and his beat. He could smile at Rita, laugh with his colleagues, or play with Harrison, but the Dark Passenger was always looking, waiting, reminding him of what he was. Think of his wife, Rita. She loved Dexter, not because of the darkness he hid, but because of the light he believed he was in him. For her, he was a protector, a man who protected her and her children from the cruelty of the world. But for Dexter, she represented something unattainable, a life free of the passenger grip. She was the closest thing she had to normal, but even she couldn't change the reality of who she was. It's like carrying a beast on your back. No matter how far Dexter ran, no matter how desperately I would like to be normal, I was always there. It wasn't just a burden. It was a constant reminder that each part of his life, no matter how well it seems, was built on a lie. And then, Trinity came. The day Rita was killed was not just a tragedy, but it was the best proof that Dexter could never escape her darkness. Trinity not only killed Rita, he broke the illusion of Dexter's normal life. And this is where things cool. Dexter did not cry Rita as most people would. He did not cry for her or fall into despair. Instead, the Dark Passenger woke up with revenge. But here is the question. Was it the search for Dexter for Trinity, about justice for Rita? Or was it just another excuse to feed your own need to kill? The truth is uncomfortable. Dexter told himself that he was avenging Rita, but deep down, the Dark Passenger didn't care. He only cared about death. Every step Dexter took when tracking Trinity was not about love or pain. It was hunger, hunting satisfaction, the emotion of delivering its own twisting brand of justice. And that is the terrifying paradox of the Dark Passenger. It convinces you that you have control, that your actions are fair, even when it pushes you more deeply into the abyss. Killing Trinity was not closure for Dexter. It was fuel for the passenger. A reminder that no matter how much he has tried to hold on to good in his life, the darkness inside him would always win. Rita's death was not only the loss of a wife or a mother, It was the time when Dexter understood that she could never overcome what she was. And the dark passenger? I was just starting. And he didn't stop there. He would push it even more. At the end of his trip, Dexter began to face a truth that he had been avoiding his entire life. The dark passenger was not a separate force that could fight or destroy. He was not an invader. It was an integral part of him. The carefully constructed walls he built to contain it were never to last. Each murder that was justified, every promise he made to follow the code, was not about controlling the passenger. It was about feeding it, the terrifying reality. The dark passenger was not just Dexter's darkest part. It was Dexter. Every time he looked in the mirror, he looked back, whispering that it doesn't matter how good he tried to do, no matter how normal he intended to be, he was always fulfilling his hunger. And that raises an awkward question. How different are we? It is possible that we do not have a dark passenger urging us to kill, but not all of us carry something inside us that we cannot control. Doubt, fears, or desires that silently form our decisions, even when we convince ourselves that we are in charge? Dexter's fight feels extreme, but it is also disturbingly familiar. Because the most terrifying monsters are not the ones who lurk in the shadows. These are the ones who live within us. Dexter's story was never to defeat the dark passenger. It was about learning to coexist with him. But even coexistence has its limits. As his life is unleashed, Dexter is forced to make a final decision. Was it a hero? Someone who could channel his darkness forever? Or was it simply a monster, unable to escape his nature? His answer was isolation. When choosing exile, Dexter not only left behind his loved ones, he abandoned the illusion of control. His decision was not about protecting others from him, although that is the story that he could tell himself. It was about surrendering, getting to the truth that no matter where or what he did, the dark passenger would always be there. For Dexter, isolation was not peace, it was survival. A gloomy recognition that the only way to live with the passenger was to keep him away from the people who cared. But this is where the tragedy of the history of Dexter shorts the deepest. When choosing the isolation, he not only was exiled from society, but was exiled from hope. I hope to find redemption. I hope it can be more than its darkness. In the end, Dexter is not only fleeing from the dark passenger, but he is also fleeing the possibility of being loved despite him. Perhaps that is the true lesson. Some battles are not destined to be won, they are destined to be supported. Dexter's story reminds us that there is a difference between defeat and surrender. Defeat is when you lose to your darkness. Surrender is when you accept it as part of you. But that acceptance has a cost. A Dexter cost was willing to pay. So what do we take from its history? Perhaps it is a reflection of our own lives. We all have shadows that we carry, parts of ourselves that we want to ignore or destroy. But perhaps the key is not to fight them incessantly. Maybe it's to understand them, live with them, even when it hurts. As Dexter shows us, the hardest battles are not the ones we fight against the world. They are the ones we fight within ourselves. And when Dexter sat alone in the desert, looking at the void of his new life, a question remained. Had peace found, or had simply surrendered? The dark passenger was still there, silent but always present, reminding him that surrender was not the same as freedom. So who is the only enemy that Dexter could not destroy? It was himself. The dark passenger was not just a burden, it was its essence. Have you ever felt that you are fighting your own shadow? Dexter's story reminds us that the hardest battles are the ones we face within ourselves. But what do you think? Could Dexter have escaped, or was I condemned from the beginning? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for seeing, and I'll see you in the next one.